Hey everybody, it's Booray from Tampa, Florida, and in this video, I am going to tell you definitively why you should not be buying the Fuji X100V. All right, before we get started, just a quick reminder, I have a podcast. It's called Photobomb. You can find it anywhere that podcasts are found. I guarantee you will enjoy it. Also, be sure and follow me on Instagram or join my group on Facebook, Pro Photo Talk with Booray Perry. And also, all the gear that I carry, my professional gear, my travel gear, everything that I have from my Fuji X100V, all of it is listed on my website. If you click one of those links and you buy one of those pieces of gear, I make like $1 maybe or something like that in commission, and it helps me to keep this channel alive because I have to pay for editing software and things like that. So be sure and check out my gear page. I would really appreciate it. All right, here's why you shouldn't buy this camera. Which sounds weird, right? Because my whole channel is practically devoted to the Fuji X100 line of cameras, and I'm about to tell you why you shouldn't buy this camera. And I am talking to you, person who loves Jeeps. What am I talking about? All right. My daughter loves Jeeps, right? She's young. She's a teenager, and she wants a Jeep. Oh, I love a Jeep, Daddy. I want a Jeep, Daddy. My daughter wouldn't know off-road if it bit her, okay? My daughter is never going to get her car stuck in the mud and have to winch it out by wrapping the winch cable around a tree, something I did many times growing up in the woods in Louisiana. My daughter does not need giant knobby tires that are four-wheel drive and cost a fortune. My daughter does not need a ride that is bumpy when she could have a nice car with a nice ride when she takes her long road trips to her band competition or wherever she is going. My daughter doesn't need a Jeep. My daughter likes the idea of a Jeep, and that's what she wants. And right now, everybody loves the idea of the Fuji X100V, and that's why you can't buy one, because somebody on TikTok said that this was a great camera and it changed their life, and now everybody's saying, I want that camera too, because I want to change my life. But listen, if you're not going to be using the thing you're buying for the very purpose that it is intended, you are going to be unhappy. You're going to spend a lot of money on a Jeep, and you're going to think it looks really cool, and then a month or two later, you're going to be like, it's windy inside, and it doesn't ride very nice, and it's expensive, and it gets low gas mileage, and there's going to be a million reasons why you're going to realize, oh, I should have just bought myself a nice Toyota Corolla or something along those lines, right? So let me just start off right. That when I say I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't buy this camera, that's why you shouldn't buy this camera. Because this camera is only for a certain type of person. And if you are that person, great. But if you aren't, you shouldn't buy this camera. Now, I've got notes on my screen because I took a deep dive today. So I've got notes on my screen. I'm going to be looking at the notes, so I apologize for glancing away at the notes. So let me just give you some help. If you're suddenly looking to buy this camera and you're going and you're looking at YouTube videos and you're watching me right now, let me explain to you what you should be doing. You should be asking yourself why you want this camera. Do you want this camera because of the retro style? You like the way it looks? Hey, that's fantastic. Fuji also makes a camera called the XT30, which is retro styled and very cool and less expensive. You should be looking at that, right? Oh, Nikon. Nikon makes a camera called the ZFC, which is so cool and so retro, and you should be looking at that as well because both of those cameras are cheaper. You could even look at a Fuji X Pro camera, which is a rangefinder style camera. Don't get the most modern one because that one's going to be kind of expensive. But if you go back like one model, yeah, that one you can be looking at. Cool retro styling. No one else is going to have a camera like that. Look at that camera. That's going to solve your Jones of I want a camera that looks like this. Fantastic. Is it the size? Do you love the size of the camera? That it's so small and it's pocketable? No problem. I got that covered too. Again, the Fuji X-T30, very small. You put a little pancake lens on it. Very small, just as small as this, sometimes smaller, I think. Take a look at that one. Also, Ricoh. Ricoh makes a great camera called the GR3. Take a look at the GR3 line. I mean, this camera is truly pocketable. You can put this one in your pocket, and it's an excellent camera. You will love this camera. Take a look at that. If it's size, that's really, really important to you. What about the film simulations? Maybe that's what's got you, right? You saw the people on Instagram or the people on TikTok, and they're showing you pictures they took with the Fuji X100V, and they're using classic chrome, or they're using ProNeg High, and you love those film simulations. Well, here's the good news. Every Fuji camera has these film simulations. Now, there are newer film simulations added to newer models of the camera, but the old ones are great as well. Right? And so like if you want classic chrome, for example, you're going to have to get a Fuji camera that has classic chrome. And if you get one that's, say, 4 or 5 years old, it's not going to have classic chrome. So you need to check and make sure it's got the particular film simulation that you want. But all Fuji cameras have the film simulation. So again, the XT30, I would definitely look at the XE4. The XE4 is small and pocketable, and it has the film simulations. So it's a lot like the Ricoh, except it's got the film simulations. Right, so take a look at. You will love that camera as well. The XE4, you will love it if you get that camera. Now, maybe it's not for any one of those reasons. Maybe it's for several reasons. Maybe it's for one or two of them combined. So let me ask you this: do you want this camera because it has retro styling? Right, it's a rangefinder style camera. It has a fixed lens at f2. It has a built-in flash. It has a leaf shutter that allows you to flash sync at 1/4000th of a second at f4. And it has a 4-stop ND filter built in. Is that why you want this camera? Because if that's why you want this camera, you're in luck, because this is the only one. This is it. Okay? There is no alternative to this camera. Not a real alternative to this camera. If everything I just said was so much Greek to you and you didn't understand what I was talking about, then believe me, you don't need this camera. You're not going to appreciate this camera. You are buying a faux Jeep. You are buying something that is built to do something that you're never going to use it for. Okay? So that's why you don't want this camera, because everything I just said explains what makes this camera great. And if you don't get that, you're wasting your money by buying this camera. I went down a rabbit hole. I watched YouTube videos, I went and looked at websites, and I looked at all the cameras that they were listing as great alternatives to the X100V, and every one of them was lacking something that I would consider to be vital in this camera and what makes this camera great. So now let's take a look at some of these features and find out if you really need them. And if you do, then this will be the right camera for you. Okay, let's start off with what I consider to be the deal killer when it comes to buying a camera like this. If you are looking for a camera because you are a street photographer and you just want to go out on the street and take street pictures, if you're into that, and if you are, you know what I mean. You're not somebody who just likes the idea of it. You're somebody who does it, right? You've got to go out every week and you've got to just do some street photography. If that's the case, then you're going to be just fine with the Nikon ZFC, or you're going to be just fine with the Ricoh. Those cameras are going to be great for you, especially the Ricoh, because it's so small. But if you want a camera that's going to do it all for you, right? You want to be able to do street photography and everything, but you also want to be able to take the camera to a party that you're going to tomorrow night and take some good pictures there too, right? Then the one thing that is going to really disqualify probably half the cameras that I've already mentioned is right there. It's the built-in flash. You've got to have the built-in flash. Yes, you can add a flash if you want to, but I'm guessing you don't want to add a flash. I'm guessing you don't want to have a second thing you have to carry around with batteries for that thing that you have to put on the camera. No. What you want is something that's quick and easy, which means you need a built-in flash. Well, guess what? The Fuji cameras, there are only 3 that have a built-in flash. Of all the cameras, just 3. This is one of them. The other one is the Fuji X100V, which I've already mentioned a couple of times, which I owned. It was my backup camera, was the Fuji X100V. I just sold it last week. It has a built-in flash as well. And there's one other camera, I have it written down, oh yeah, that's right, the SS10, the XS10. Is it the XS10? The SX10. The XS10, the XX10 also has a built-in flash. And a little bit of retro styling, but kind of a modern styling because of the way it's got the big grip on it and everything. So great, it's got the built-in flash. Bingo. It's got the Fuji simulations, bingo. However, it doesn't have the styling. It doesn't have the rangefinder. It doesn't have the built-in ND filters. Right, so it's not a true alternative to this camera. But it's a Fuji with a built-in flash. Okay, so if the built-in flash is important, make sure the camera has a built-in flash, because a lot of the cameras I've mentioned do not have built-in flashes. So make sure it does. The Ricos, for example, which are fantastic cameras, the newer ones don't have the built-in flash. The older ones do, but the newer ones do not have the built-in flash. So that right there eliminates a huge section. I'll tell you what else eliminates a huge section is price. You'll notice that I haven't mentioned Leica very much, or when I say very much, I mean I haven't mentioned it at all. And I haven't mentioned some of the really great Sony pocketables, and it's because of price. If it costs $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000, you can't consider it an alternative to this camera. So they're right off the table, right off the bat. The next big thing that can be a deal killer when looking for something that will compare to this camera is the interchangeable lens. And by that I mean the lack of an interchangeable lens. This is very weird because you would think it's kind of odd to say that a camera with an interchangeable lens is not comparable to this, because this one has a fixed lens. The interchangeable lens, just by definition, is better because you can put different lenses on the camera, and that's true. So if you buy a camera with an interchangeable lens like the XT30 and you put a pancake lens, a small lens on it, then you just leave that lens on it, you never put any other lens on it, then you're good, right? You're fine. You're good to go. It's just basically it's the same as this camera when it comes to its lens, because you're not changing it. So it's always there. It's fixed as far as you're concerned. But if you're doing that, it seems kind of silly to buy a camera with an interchangeable lens and then never swap the lenses out. That just seems kind of odd. But that's okay. I mean, you can do it. But here's the other problem. If you're looking for something that's comparable to this, yeah, you might be able to find a camera with an interchangeable lens that costs like $700 or $800. But once you buy the lens that goes on that camera, you're going to be over $1,000. And this is like $1,300, $1,400 new. And they're more expensive right now because people are gouging you. I get that. But the true value of this camera is $1,300 or $1,400. And if you buy an XT30 and you put a pancake lens on it, you're going to be over $1,000. So it's comparable in price. It's a little bit cheaper. And you've got those interchangeable lenses. But there's other things it can't do that I've already mentioned. I'm going to talk about that too. So interchangeable lenses. If you really don't want an interchangeable lens, that also wipes a lot of cameras off of our list. So if it doesn't have a flash, it's out. If it has interchangeable lenses, it's out. And then we get to some stuff that's really special. The leaf shutter. The leaf shutter. See, here's where things are going to get really tricky, because none of the cameras I've mentioned have a leaf shutter. I take that back. The Ricoh GRs, they have a leaf shutter. But the leaf shutter on the Ricoh GRs, if I'm correct, does not flash sync up to 1/4000th of a second, and only flash syncs up to like 1250 or 1500 or something like that. Plus, of course, if you're getting the new Ricoh, it doesn't have the built-in flash at all. That right there, that's the big thing about this camera. That if you don't know that, if you don't understand it, and if you don't understand what you can do with it, you really shouldn't be buying this camera. It's just a waste of money. If you have never said to yourself, I wish that I could use fill flash outside on a bright day and still have an aperture of f2, right? If you've never said that to yourself, then you're not gonna appreciate this camera. You're not gonna get what this camera is all about. But if you're a photographer and you understand what I just said, then you're gonna be over the moon when it comes to this camera. And let me tell you, if you don't understand what I've just said, but you want to, I have a whole series on my YouTube channel called Booray Explains, where I am step-by-step explaining all these terms that I'm using. And if you go there, you will learn what I'm talking about, and maybe you will then be like, oh, that really is cool, and this is the camera for me. But if that's not what you're interested in, this is not the camera for you. Because the best thing about this camera is the fact that it has a built-in flash, that you can use that flash at f2 on a bright day and also shoot at 1/2000th of a second because of the leaf shutter. 1/2000th of a second at f2, 1/4000th of a second at f4, I believe. Right? So I can't stress this enough. If you don't know what I'm talking about, this is not the camera for you. Go buy yourself a Ricoh. Go buy an XT30. You'll be perfectly happy. You'll save a little bit of money, and you'll be good to go. There are other things, by the way. The built-in ND filter. But again, if you don't know what it means to shoot at f2 on a bright day, then you don't necessarily know what a built-in ND filter is going to do for you. This has a 4-stop built-in ND filter. So you can shoot at f2 on a bright day because even though you've maxed out your shutter speed at 1/4000th of a second, you can even knock down the sun some more with that ND filter and then shoot wide open at f2. Did you understand what I just said? If you didn't, this is not the camera for you. There's one other thing that might be important to you, and it's the viewfinder, because many of the cameras that I mentioned earlier don't have them. For example, the Ricohs don't have them, and the Fuji X100V don't have them. They don't have viewfinders. They just have the screen. And if you're a person who's like, great, I'm a photographer and I use the screen, that's great. I use my screen too. But if you want the experience of looking through the camera and shooting through the viewfinder, that's going to eliminate the Ricoh. The Ricoh's off the table now. And I really do think the Ricoh is a great camera. But it's off the table now because it doesn't have the viewfinder. Now, it does have the leaf shutter, which is great. Right, so that, I would say probably the most comparable camera to this would be the Ricoh line, right? That's probably the most comparable camera. But it doesn't have the viewfinder, and it doesn't have the film sims, and I don't think the leaf shutter will flash sync as high. And if you have the newer Ricoh, it doesn't have a built-in flash. And when you take away those things, then it really is not comparable to this camera at all. So, I've spelled all this out for you. And you've said to yourself, I still want this camera. I want this camera because maybe I don't understand everything that Booray said, but I want to experience that stuff. I want to learn about that stuff. I want to become a photographer. I want to know what he means when he says that it, flash sync speeds at 1/4000th of a second in f4. That's great. Man, I'm welcoming you on this journey, and I envy you because you're going to learn so much, and you're going to love so much of what you learn, and you're going to feel enriched by it, and you're going to feel like you're a real photographer. But if you're looking for an alternative to the X100V, then some other brand, you are not going to find it. It doesn't really exist. The best alternative to the X100V is the X100F. The camera that they came out with just before this, or the X100T, or the X100S. All of those cameras are great alternatives, and if you go on YouTube, you can probably find one for about half what this one's listing for, or even less, and they're great cameras. I know, I owned 2 of them. I had the S and I had the F, and they're fantastic cameras. Yeah, they don't have all the features. The flippy screen was added in this model. The neutral density filter went from 3 to 4 stops in this model. The lens got sharper in this model. The designs are a little bit different, just a little bit different, when you come to this model. And there's the film simulations. Like there's some that are in this model that are not in the last model. So they're not a true alternative. No 2 cameras are identical, but they are as close as you're going to get because you're still going to get the leaf shutter. You're still going to get the built-in flash. And let me tell you, the leaf shutter and the built-in flash, to me, are the 2 most crucial things in this camera. And people don't talk about it enough. They really don't. Because I just watched a whole bunch of videos with guys going, here's a great alternative to the Fuji X100V, and it doesn't have a built-in flash. Which means it's a great alternative, unless, of course, you want to take a picture after the sun goes down. I don't understand how that's an alternative. How can you say that a camera is an alternative when it doesn't have a flash? So that's really what prompted me to make this video. Was I was just annoyed at how many people were pointing to cameras and saying they were alternatives to the Fuji X100V when they don't have a flash. That's like a deal killer. All right, so there we go. Video done. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope that it has helped you figure out where you are in your journey. Because if you are just somebody who is looking for a camera that looks cool and might fit in your pocket and is fun to use, this is a fantastic camera, but you really don't need this camera. Go get something else. Go get the XE4. Go get the XT30. Go get the Ricoh. But don't get this camera, because you are buying a Jeep that you're never going to take off-road. Throw me a like, throw me a sub, throw me a comment, trash me if you want to, I don't care, and thanks for watching.